The State Department released its annual human rights report today, but unlike years past, this edition has come under scrutiny for what it's not reporting about many issues and countries with poor human rights records. Nick Schifrin is here now to discuss the report and to look forward to this active week of renewed Trump diplomacy with Russia. Good to see you, Nick.
Thanks, Alma.
Let's talk about this report. What is different in this year's report from years past?
The report removes standalone sections on women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and discrimination on racial or ethnic lines. It strengthens criticisms of countries that Trump and his administration have clashed with diplomatically, and weakens criticism of some of the administration's allies. So let's take one example, El Salvador, which, of course, as you know well, is the strongest regional immigration partner for the United States. Last year's report, the last one written by the Biden administration, reads in part, quote, significant human rights issues included credible reports of unlawful or arbitrary killings, enforced disappearance, torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment by security forces, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, arbitrary arrest and detention. That paragraph actually goes on for double that length in the last Biden administration report. It has been replaced by this sentence: there were no credible reports of significant human rights abuses, quote, unquote. So that's the kind of change that you see. Today, Tammy Bruce, the State Department spokesman, was asked specifically about the El Salvador report. She didn't engage with the text, but said this about the administration's approach.
Each administration, like with President Trump, reflects a value system and an agenda and a vision that convince the American people to vote for them. It needed to change based on the point of view and the vision of the Trump administration. It certainly promotes, as does our work, a respect for human rights around the globe.
Another example, Amna, Israel. The Biden administration's last report was more than 100 pages. This is less than a fifth of that. It removes most of, or almost all of the criticisms of the Israeli government. But on the other hand, this year's report increases criticisms of South Africa, which, of course, the Trump administration has clashed with diplomatically, and increases criticisms of Brazil for targeting Jair Bolsonaro, the former president, who, of course, tried to launch a coup against the current government more than 2 years ago.
Some dramatic changes there. So when you talk to folks in the human rights community, what are they saying about this report?
Historically, this report has been very important for the community and also for individual human rights advocates around the world, because it's appeared in war crimes cases. It appears in individual asylum cases. It appears in academic research. But parts of this year's report do not match that historic credibility and accuracy, argues the Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch's Washington office, Nicole Wittersheim.
We feel like this has been the politicization of a very credible, useful human rights tool that really led credibility to the whole entire exercise of the State Department for the last couple decades.
Wittersheim says the report is accurate on some countries, places like Afghanistan and Haiti, but those countries are the very places that the Department of Homeland Security has removed protections for refugees living in the United States.
They document terrible things that are happening right now in Afghanistan, particularly to women and children. Same with Sudan. Same with South Sudan, relatively accurate read on Ethiopia, Haiti, and yet at the same time, they're canceling protection for Afghans, for Haitians, for Venezuelans, for Nicaraguans, and they're sending people back to these countries to be victims and sending them back into peril.
State Department spokesman Tammy Bruce said today the new report removes, quote, politically biased demands and assertions.
Meanwhile, Nick, I know you're also reporting on the war in Ukraine and this upcoming summit. What are you hearing from European leaders and from the White House about what to expect from this Friday summit between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin?
The Ukrainians and the Europeans are especially worried that President Trump could make a deal about Ukraine without Ukraine in the room directly with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Today, Zelensky said that Putin wants Ukraine to withdraw from all of Donetsk, all of eastern Ukraine, including parts that Ukraine still controls and that Russia doesn't occupy. He rejected that and said today that Ukrainians would reject any deal made directly and only between President Trump and President Putin.
It is impossible to talk about Ukraine without Ukraine, and no one will accept that. So the conversation between Putin and Trump may be important for their bilateral track, but they cannot agree on anything about Ukraine without us. I truly believe and hope that the U.S. president understands and realizes that.
Today, the White House downplayed expectations, calling Friday's summit, quote, a listening exercise for President Trump, emphasizing that it was President Putin who actually requested it. Putin has talked, and his allies have talked about normalizing relations with the United States, going beyond Ukraine, talking about things like nuclear stability, possible economic deals, direct flights. But today, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt rejected that.
Is President Trump open to those kind of peripheral conversations, or is this directly focused on ending the war in Ukraine?
I think this conversation on Friday is focused on ending the war in Ukraine as far as the president's perspective goes. Those conversations, I think the president is interested in having, but his main priority right now is ending this war and to stop the killing that has gone on for far too long.
And the war does go on. Ukraine struggling to hold the line. This video released by the Russian Ministry of Defense just today shows Russian soldiers raising Russian flags in the eastern province of Donetsk. Amna, the timing for Ukraine could not be worse. It could allow Putin to paint Ukraine in dire straits during that summit with Trump.
Lots happening on that front. I know you're going to continue to cover it all. Nick Schifrin, thanks as always.
Thank you.